Welcome to the Firehouse Roundtable podcast, brought to you by the Ventura Fire Foundation. I'm one of your hosts, Peter McKenzie, retired fire captain with the City of Ventura Fire Department, and my co-host, Jason Kay, active battalion chief with the City of Ventura Fire Department. We are going to bring awareness to real issues that face firefighters and their families. We want you to feel like you have a seat at the kitchen table, which every firefighter knows is the heart of the firehouse. Let's get right into the episode.
This is Joe from Ventura Fire Foundation. Before jumping into this conversation with Nick Hanna, we wanted to warn you that it gets pretty heavy. Nick has had a difficult year with his mental health, but we appreciate him sharing his story on the podcast because we think he provides great insights and his knowledge will help others who may be going through similar issues. We originally recorded Nick in October for release in November, but his health worsened and we decided to hold off. He's doing better now, though, thankfully, so we are releasing the episode now. This conversation is split across 2 episodes. This is part 1. At the end of part 2, which will be released in a couple weeks, Nick updates his journey and what he's gone through since we originally recorded. So be sure to listen for that. And finally, if you're in crisis, there are resources to help. The National Suicide and Crisis Hotline is 988. You can call or text at any time. There are also resources on the Ventura Fire Foundation website. Just go to venturafirefoundation.org and click the If You Need Help page. Thank you for listening to Nick's important story.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Firehouse Roundtable. Today I feel like we have a prodigal son who's returning, Nick Hanna, who Nick was a Ventura City firefighter for a while, and then he left, went up to Santa Cruz Fire Department, and he's back to talk about his story. So, Nick, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you too. Let's reintroduce yourself. I think that's like a rap lyric or something, but reintroduce yourself to people who don't know who you are, and then we'll get into your story a little bit later. But just how'd you get to Ventura? How'd you leave? All that stuff.
So I was trying to get into the fire service. This is around 2011, and I was a private paramedic working in Santa Cruz. And basically, I knew Ventura from doing surf contests and the area there, and always liked it and heard that they were hiring. So I came down to test, and I didn't think I had a shot at all to get hired. I took the written test, passed the test, and then interviewed. And the next thing I know, my whole life is changing. Uprooted my life here in Santa Cruz and went down to Ventura with open arms. And it was, I wouldn't change it for the world. I met some really amazing people and learned a lot about myself during the process. I was living there, working there, obviously working at Station 5 and having a blast, working with all you guys, and I loved it. But family comes first, and we were having our second kid, and my wife was really missing her family, who they're very, very close with, which I didn't have that on my side, so I didn't want to take that from her. And we made a decision to move back up to Santa Cruz if I got hired with Santa Cruz City Fire, because I worked for them as a lifeguard when I was younger. And it was one of the biggest decisions I had to make. I didn't want to leave, but I felt like it was in order for my family life to succeed and my wife to be truly happy. That was the move I had to make. And now I'm here.
Yeah. Was it your wife was from Santa Cruz?
Correct. Yeah.
Were you married when you got hired? I don't remember.
No, I got married after probation.
Oh, okay. But you were with her, obviously.
I was with her. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. And what were the years on that? Just so people have an idea.
I was 2011 till 2016.
Okay. So a little over 5 years.
Yeah. Then I left. I got hired here in July of 16, I think.
Well, make no mistake about it, man. Ventura City misses you. We talk about you all the time. Some of it's even good. But out at Station 5, we have good memories of you, and most of them involve your vertical challenges. I will say that a lot of the stuff you're already saying rings true with me, that you made sure families first. A lot of guys will move for their family, and that kind of encapsulates what's important to you as a human. So that's awesome. Will you compare and contrast a little bit Santa Cruz Fire Department and Ventura Fire Department just as a whole? Is there huge differences in call volume or culture or anything like that?
I would say they're very similar in as far as their demographics, their call volume, lack of staffing, support, as far as, I won't go into the whole political side of it, right? But yes, we're 4 stations, and we're 4 stations with the one dual house, just like Station 5 with an engine and a truck. And we run around 11,000 calls a year, which is right around Ventura, where we got 6 stations and you're running 16, 17,000 calls. So it's really comparable. Big homeless population, beach town, some of the same hazards. Our geographical area that we cover is pretty wide and very diverse as far as we've got redwood trees, redwood forests. Then we have gnarly up coast 200-foot cliffs going into the ocean, So and we got a main downtown strip, and, anyways.
Is it ALS, and do you guys have ambulances?
Yep, same thing as Ventura. We only hire paramedics. AMR is the only transport. We do not transport at all. Yeah, ocean rescue. We do not have a USAR team like Ventura does, but we have hazmat. It's so similar. I mean,
it sounds really similar.
It's just, I called it the Northern California version of Ventura. I mean, as far as culture wise, the only thing that culture, I was talking to Pete about this, and I've talked to a lot of you guys about this, is the Santa Cruz City's culture is very good. It's very young. We just had a lot of retirements, really good guys. But what we're lacking, in my opinion, is some of that fire culture of really being that bonding, where Ventura City had that. In my opinion, like when I got hired, being a guy from out of the area, I felt really open arms, and I felt like people really, really, basically if they could tell, like you could tell Mukes, there's tons of guys there that, Van Man, all the guys that were kind of these, the captains and people that I looked up to where they could tell if you were all in. Like Daryl was the same way. You could tell if you were all in, then they gave you, they accepted you. But if you weren't all in, it was very apparent that if you weren't all in, they were not going to, that door is going to close. And that's how it should be. But I think that's what makes things so tight. And I wish Santa Cruz had a little bit more of that. And I think it could get that more, but I miss Ventura for a lot of those reasons, is the tight knit kind of all shifts hang out. It's not like every shift's a different department. It's kind of like everyone kind of, from what I experienced, on board, got along and cared, and everyone knew each other's families. And especially coming to the firehouse, like, I mean, speaking of all those people, like obviously like Clappy and I got along together really well because we worked together for a while. I mean, he was sending me pictures of, small people falling out of engines like every day. Like for 2 years after I left, he was sending me that. And
for our listeners' benefit, Nick, how tall are you?
I am 5. I'm a healthy 5'7". Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. You're taller than I remember. No. Let me give one story to how this kind of came about, and it speaks to exactly what you're saying. Like my daughter is applying to colleges right now, and UC Santa Cruz is like her, like that's where she wants to go, the whole Redwood vibe, all that stuff. And I go, all right. I know Nick's up there. I need to get like the lowdown on the school, the area. So I reached out, and immediately we reconnected. Like I just saw you last week. If she goes to school there, it brings a lot of comfort to me knowing that I have a connection, i.e. you, in town, that if something goes wrong, I know I can call on you and you will haul ass up there and go do whatever needs to be done. Like that, which is testament to the culture that you're talking about that our department has and whatnot, which I think is super cool. And I 100% agree with everything you're saying. And then obviously when we reconnected, we just caught up, you kind of went into your story and kind of what's going on now. And then we were like, well, do we need to get this on the podcast? Because people need to hear this, because I think there's a lot of people that are struggling as well. So yeah. Should we jump into the story? Jason, you got any more funny stories or lighthearted stuff before we dive in? Or
No, enough of the lighthearted stuff. I'm actually super excited to hear. I have not heard Nick's whole story since he left. It's super good to see you. I'm glad you decided to join us on the podcast. And go ahead and get into it. I'd love to hear what's going on.
Yeah, and I'll just say one before you get started. For our listeners, this is a heavy story, and this is and I applaud Nick for being so open and willing to share, because I mean, in our department alone, we could rattle off a few names of guys who are struggling, and I'm sure it's the same in Santa Cruz. It's the same everywhere, which is one of the things we figured out in this podcast is it doesn't matter where you work. The problems are the same. And I think having your firsthand account of kind of what happened is super valuable. So I just want to say thank you for being willing to do this. But yeah, let's turn it over to you. I mean, you're the best narrator of your own story, so we can ask questions and interject, but I want to give you the autonomy to kind of take it where you want. So yeah, why don't you go for it?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And, one of the things I've learned kind of through this whole thing, and I'll say this, well, you hear this a lot, but is being vulnerable and having vulnerability. And the only way that you get through stuff or get through hard times is subjecting yourself to being vulnerable. And we're not used to doing that as a culture. Mm-mm. We're just not. So I've learned a lot in this process kind of about myself and about being vulnerable and being open to vulnerability. I'm going to kind of start off basically. So I've been a firefighter now for almost 13, 14 years, right? When I left Ventura, I went through a whole nother firefighter academy, which was a whole recruit academy again, right? 18-week. It wasn't as long as Ventura's. So I went through all of that, and then I became really heavily involved. I felt like I was comfortable in the sense of me as being a firefighter paramedic. I became a shop steward for our union. Then I became the vice president, and then I became the president of Local 1716. So the last 4 years, I've been in the upper echelons of the board. And I also took over the SCBA program. I was the lead mentor for our department. And I was also the historian for our department and a lead academy instructor for like 7 different subjects, from SCBAs to vent, so on and so on. So I was like very, very involved. And then working at our busiest station, working on our truck and our engine, just like Station 5 is. And we used to not rotate. Now we rotate. It's funny, just like was rotating when we left. When I'm like, I've done this before. So I was under a lot of stress, but to me, it didn't feel like stress. To me, it just felt like this is the way I've been my whole life, right? Like I'm juggling a family, I'm juggling work, I'm putting in more and getting more back, because that's what we do as firemen, right? Is people that are true firemen, and I emphasize this, is the people that are out there, there is that 10, 15% of your department that are true firemen, and the rest of them aren't. And I hate to say that, but that is the truth. And meaning that some people give it all and give too much. And there's that fine line in between giving too much and sacrificing too much versus not sacrificing anything. And when someone ever finds that medium, let me know. But
that's funny. I'll stop you real quick, because that's funny. We talk about that very thing on this podcast over and over and over again. And Jason and I are on 2 different sides of this, right? So Jason was the guy that gave too much, did everything. Probably sounds like very similar to the path you were going down. And I was the opposite, which, I don't know. I don't know about self-reflection here, but like I picked the foundation, 1 or 2 things, and did that. And that's a big, and I don't say I have it figured out, because I think I probably could do more, but that's interesting. And I like how you call it true firemen. You're talking about the 10, 15% of people who do stuff, right? Is that essentially what you're talking about?
Yeah. And I'm not meaning like, it's amount of how many things you're doing. It's what you're putting into those other things you're doing outside your job description.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So like if you choose the pipes and drums band, or you choose like, it's something giving back and something giving more, because you have a calling, in a sense, like you're doing the foundation work. No one's telling you, really, do you not have to do anything? Could you go to work, show up and do that? Sure. Yeah, you could. Right. Yeah. But that's not how the fire service survives. And that's not how it gets better. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up too, Nick. And if anybody, just like Nick said, I'll echo the same thing. If anybody has found that percentage that's correct, call in, man, because we have not. We're still struggling figuring out what's too much and what's not enough. And I think it's very individual for each person. Yes. And you only know you're doing too much after you've committed to too much. So go ahead and continue on with your story.
Yeah. No, so basically, I was burning it on both ends, both as a father, a husband. My wife works full-time as a hospice nurse. I have 2 kids, Nate and Molly, that are 9 and 7 now, but they were younger, obviously a few years ago. So more responsibilities coming with that. I wasn't sleeping, and I was constantly at work on my 4-day. If I wasn't doing trainings with Ocean Rescue, I was going to union meetings or seminars or, right, like it just kept building and building. Well, then you throw in, we had without getting too much into it, between COVID and we had some contract negotiations and then an investigation on our fire chief, which I was all either a vice president or the union president during that time, was extremely stressful. And some of these people I knew personally. So just like Ventura, which makes it hard, is you're just big enough to have some big problems, but you're also small enough where you know everybody and everything's personal. And then you're trying to balance that work and personal relationship that you have, which is really delicate. And we had a new fire chief who got promoted, and he's a great guy. Looked up to him, still look up to him. Very smart. And there was a sticky situation that put me in a bad spot. And luckily it's resolved itself. And I won't go into that as a whole story, but what I'm getting at is the amount of stress that I was having from that single event is what I think potentially pushed me over my amount, is what my wife said. Is she said she noticed a lot of things in me that I didn't notice. I wasn't surfing. I wasn't working out as much. I was going to work, saying how I didn't want to go to work, which I never was like that, right? Like, I really don't want to go to work, or I'm not having fun at work. And that's not been me ever. She's never heard me say that about my job. We ended up having all this going on. I'm juggling all these things. I was taking captain level classes, right, to get my officer's cert to eventually try to promote. So I was doing that at the same time. And we finally said, you know what? We're going to go take the kids to Disneyland. I was like, okay, fine. Well, let's take the kids to Disneyland. So we go down to Disneyland. We have a good time. Nate ends up getting really sick, like 103 fever sick, like really bad. So my wife and I basically say, hey, we're going to pack the kids up because we're all going to end up getting it. So we might as well have enough energy to drive home right now, because we didn't fly. And so we did that. Long story short, I got sick, and I got really sick. Everybody got cleared up for it. I had about 104 to 105 temperature for almost 4 days. And I didn't know what was happening to me. I just felt really bad. So this is right going up to Christmas time. As this is happening, I go to the doctor to get cleared because why? I'm not going to be that dirtbag that calls in sick on Christmas Eve, right, or Christmas. So I'm going to go to work no matter what. And my whole body was telling me not to, but I didn't want to be that guy. Again, reputation, ego, that kind of thing of like, I'm not that guy. I'm not one of those dudes. Like, I'm not going to do that. And I went to the doctor. They said, you have influenza A. Your fever is subsiding. If you're good in 24 hours, you can go to work, which I wish you would have said something otherwise. But I said, okay, fine. I go back home. It's Christmas Eve. I'm literally on the couch staring at the wall. And I'm just like, feel this like overwhelming wave of feeling. I don't know how to describe it. Really felt just crappy. I fell asleep at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock at night, slept all night, got up, went to work. And of course, did we get worked at work? Yes. I got maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours of sleep. I just felt off and I felt dizzy. I just was like, man, what is going on with me? I keep pushing through, and then I go to work. I'm at work. I'm on the truck, and it was 12 o'clock at night. We ran a call at like 1 a.m, got back, and I felt this overwhelming, just like dizziness. I felt drunk. Like I was like, what is going on with me? All of a sudden started having palpitations in my chest. And we got another call, another tones go off. I go again, I get in the car. My chest is just pounding the whole time. By the fourth call after midnight, I completely shut down. It was a guy with his car ran out of gas or something. It wasn't even a call. And I told my captain, I started crying in the back of the tiller box, and I broke down, and I was like, I don't know what's going on with me. I can't get out of the rig. And he's kept me in the car. They figured out the call. And all I remember is just feeling this overwhelm of emotions that I couldn't control. I just sobbing, crying, anxiety attack, just like, what is going on with me? My captain's like, are you okay to drive back to the rig, to drive back to the house? And I said, yeah, I can. I get back to the station. We park the rig. I get out. I go in my room, and it's just getting worse, like worse. This basically ensues where I go home, and I ended up having panic attacks for almost 4 days straight. And I didn't know why. I was sleeping maybe an hour and a half, if that. I called a guy from work after to take me to the ER. So I went to the ER. They said, you're burned out. We've seen this before. Here's some Ativan and knock yourself out. You'll be fine in a week. And I wish that would have been the case. So essentially, nothing started getting better. My sleep deprivation and my anxiety was so bad that I was waking up at 2 a.m. on the dot, like no later. It was like my internal clock had been turned on, and it was permanently set for 2 a.m. And I would wake up and I felt like I could run through a wall. I couldn't sit still. I was pacing the house. I was running laps around my block at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, just trying to slow myself down. The only thing that would take it away would be to take an Ativan, and it would knock me out. And it would obviously we know what Ativan does to our system. Like it just wipes out your central nervous system. It's like, it doesn't reset you. It just completely numbs it. I end up going to the doctors. I can't even tell you my primary physician I went to. Same thing. You're burned out. You need this. You just need sleep. This. I got every diagnosis from bipolar disorder to depression to anxiety and everything in between. This is really common with PTSD. Is when it first starts, you go to the doctor and they're just telling you what they're treating is what your symptoms that you're telling them, right? And so they're going, oh no, you have this. No, what did they do? They kept giving me pill. I ripped through like 12 or 13 medications in a matter of 2 months, and nothing was working. As time went on, I became more isolated, more depressed. I couldn't even take my kids to school. I was shaking in my bed. My wife at one point wanted to call 911 because she thought I was having a seizure, but I was just having an anxiety attack. I was just in bed, and my legs would just not stop shaking, and I'm just sitting there going, why is this happening to me? I ended up going to Stanford because I wanted to get out of our local hospital area to talk to some experts up there, which I did. They did a CT scan. I got an MRI, every kind of scan, every kind of blood work you can think of, I got. I went to Stanford and was like, what the hell's wrong with me? They did all the blood work, everything. They came back, and I'll never forget this, and it was one of the most traumatizing things ever, is they came back with the psych unit to me. They didn't come back and tell me that everything was okay. They came back with me with a psychiatric team, and it was devastating to me. I started crying. I started having an anxiety attack again because I was like, this can't be happening to me. My wife is bawling, crying, looking at me. She doesn't know what to do. I've been up for 3 months, basically, every medication. I was on 10 milligrams of Valium, and it wouldn't put me down. I was overriding every medication that they could give me for sleep. And it's the weirdest feeling because you're like, I'm not crazy. They're like, you're very articulate and very like with it. And I'm like, yes. And I'm telling you something's wrong, right? Like there is something wrong with me. Like that's why I'm here. Like what the F is wrong with me? And that's when, I sat down with one of the other psychiatrists and they started going over stuff, and they're like, you have PTSD. Like this is what this is. And I said, well, okay. And that's great. Well, how do I get rid of it? And she's like, you don't. And it was the part of the acceptance of this whole thing has been the hardest thing about it, is accepting that I am not going to be the same Nick that I was 2 years ago. And nobody is, right? Nobody is the same person they were 2-3 years ago. But I am not going to be, I have to maintain myself and treat myself and watch myself for the remainder of my career and my life. Because this job and I'll get into it more, but my childhood life predisposed me for getting this. And there's a lot of guys in our position that are probably going to be they're either dealing with some sort of it at some level right now, or they're going to have it like me where I had a break. I mean, that's what happened. At least the way that I chalk it up for is that I had a mental break, and my card deck got full and it spilled over. And I think a lot of that, what they think happened with me. So getting back to my story, I hired an integrative doctor outside my workers' comp, because we know how great workers' comp is. He basically said that the flu was the tipping point for me. The increase of stress, the lack of sleep, so sleep deprivation before I got sick, then getting sick. They think that I had brain inflammation from the fever, which then triggered my PTSD. So dealing with multiple things. Also with PTSD, 50% of the people that get it also develop major depression during their initial diagnosis, which is what happened to me. So I was dealing with complications from a viral infection to PTSD to now major depression. So I was dealing with like 3 different things that literally they are calling it a perfect storm. And they said that most people get this have this happen to them when they retire, but lucky for me, I had it before I retired. They said that a lot of this happens to do with your family, your meaning the way you grew up. So I never was real big with this. Some of the guys with the department from Ventura knew my story. Not all of it, but I did not have the best childhood. My mom was a heavy alcoholic, was drinking by the time that I could remember, when I was about 9 years old. And I found her, I would come home from school from the bus and find her drunk, passed out on the couch or the bed or puking up blood. And I would call 911 or, they told me, I don't know how many times that she was not going to make it. And then she would rally. I dealt with that for like 13 years. She was on hospice for about six of those time. She died in 2009. But what I didn't realize is I was protecting my sisters at that time. My father didn't make some good decisions during that period of time either, and wasn't in the picture as much. So I was kind of left on my own dealing that. I didn't go see a counselor. I didn't see any therapist. I got told, hey, that's life. It's, this is the way it goes, and deal with it, essentially. Then I had a family, right? And then I had this job. And so the way that they describe this, and I'll talk more about who they is I was preloaded. And when they mean preloaded, they mean that when you're a kid and you're exposed to a high levels amount of stress, and your tolerance level is even shrunken then, right? So then the people that get into this profession like we do, that are helpers, well, what did I do to my mom? I tried to help my mom, right? I was always trying to help my sisters. So naturally, I chose a profession of trying to help people that are in a bad spot because I already knew how to do it, And I never even thought about it this way until I had this lovely rig. So what I'm getting at is I've met a lot of people in the fire service that came from rough backgrounds. So if they're preloaded like I was, they're preloaded to get PTSD or to have an event somewhat like I have. And it is preventable. All those poo-poo things that everyone, up here people would make fun of it and they call it a brain sprain. We had another guy in our department that got it, and I kind of snapped on a couple of people at work because they did, a couple guys didn't like this individual. And I said, well, I don't care if you don't like that. It's a freaking human being. And he's one of us. So he's hurting. And you've obviously not hurt before, because if you did, you wouldn't open your mouth on anyone, right? No one deserves to go through that pain. And until you've gone through that pain, you have no idea what it's like, right? But everyone gets on the bandwagon, right? It's the 9th grade fire service where everybody sits there and goes like this and huddles to one group and then makes fun of the other group. And it is what it is, right? But what I'm here to do and to tell my story is that like this stuff happened to me and it's real, and people that make fun of it and go, oh, this guy's just trying to get a pension and retire out late or whatever it is, right? They don't want to work, or they're asking for a whole lot of karma that they don't want to deal with because it is real.
Thanks for listening. This is Joe from Ventura Fire Foundation. We have an exciting lineup of free webinars for firefighter families in 2024. In February, James Boomhauer, a critical care transport specialist paramedic and lead peer support director, will talk about PTSD, how to recognize it, and build your resilience. The webinars are open to fire families throughout the U.S. and will be held on Zoom. There are limited seats available though, so register soon. You can register on our website or through the link in the show notes. All of the webinars will be recorded and made available on our website and YouTube channel. Support from Vanguard Charitable made this series possible, and we thank them. Now back to the show.
You were at Stanford, and they brought in that that's where you kind of left off the timeline wise.
Yes. So I went to Stanford. They basically, and this is crazy to even think about now, but so they said, this is what we can do for you. We can hold you in the psych ward overnight and wait for a bed for our psych unit for you to be admitted to. My wife did not know what to do. Everything was not working. I was so exhausted from anxiety attack after anxiety attack, not sleeping after not sleeping. My wife, she didn't know what to do with me. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I ended up spending the night in the ER in this holding cell for the psych unit. And it was the scariest thing that I've ever done in my life. I hadn't slept, like I said, for almost 3.5 months, but they gave me 2 hydroxyzines and a clonidine, and I slept for 4 hours in there. And that was the longest I had slept in almost 3.5 months. I woke up to a schizophrenic screaming. The next door neighbor of mine was pounding on the door and just there's a chalkboard in there, and they're just going like this with their nails over and over and over and over again. And I was just like, get me out of here, and my wife, Rory, left for maybe 5 hours and came back, was just a mess, gave me clothes, gave me all this stuff. They finally said they had a bed. I went up to the psych unit, and I was, I had this, being a paramedic for as long as we have and running the calls, right? That's why no one goes in to get help, because like me, I was in there. I'm like, I ran calls on these people. Like, what am I doing here? Like, everything in my bone was like, this is not where I belong. I'm not good right now, but I'm not where I belong. Like, I don't belong home. I need help. This isn't going to get me the help, which I can tell you where it kind of went. But so I went up to the psych unit there. I look, and half people are drooling. I'm like, dude, this is not going to work. So I signed out AMA because I was voluntary. I never got put on a hold. Went upstairs, took 1 lap around it, and I'm like, I'm out of here. And they're like, well, we can put you. I'm like, what are you going to do for me? And they go, we'll put you on a mood stabilizer and an antidepressant and hold you for 10 days. And I said, okay, so where's the therapy? Where's all this? Like, I looked at their chalkboard, and it was like 2 hours of therapy a day, maybe. And otherwise it's just walking zombies. And I'm like, my wife looks at me and she's crying. She's like, let's get out of here. And I'm like, yeah, let's get out of here. So I threw my clothes on. We went back home, and nothing changed. I went home, and same stuff was happening. Got worse. I was still not sleeping more, but I became more depressed. Was not leaving the house. The best way that I could describe it was that I felt like I was half drunk. Felt like I could not responsibly take care of my kids. I couldn't take them to school. I was in bed and just angry, super angry. My wife was doing everything. Cooking, cleaning, taking them to soccer practice. My phone was going off, and I was not talking to anybody. One of my buddies, older guy, it's a battalion chief here, showed up at my house and basically was like, what's going on? Like, you're not answering your phone. So I talked to him for a while. At this point, I hadn't been on any medication or any like antidepressants or anything like that, because I ended up going down to San Diego in last January, and during that time, and tried a different treatment modality. Didn't work. But anyways, what I'm getting at was I had gotten to the point where I was going to therapy twice a week. I was trying different medications. They weren't working. I was told I was medication resistant, that my genetics, I got DNA testing done for medications. There's a sheet that you can get, which I don't know if you guys know this exists, which insurance companies don't promote because then you're not trying all their meds. That's my own opinion. There's a DNA testing, genetic testing that you can get that is a DNA swab that you get, and it'll give you 65 or 75%. The medications that you get are which are going to work for you. So it'll give you a list of top 10 medications that are more than likely going to take for your genetic makeup.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even know that existed.
It's $400, but it's worth every penny, because if you think about it, if you've ever been on antidepressants and you go up and down those things, it's hell. So if that can limit 1 or 2 of those medications from doing that, to find the right one, it's worth it in its weight in gold, because then you're talking weeks, 6 weeks, 4 or 6 weeks. So that was a learning process. So let me get back here. I end up going home. As you know, it was really raining a ton last year up here. I'm at home. I'm extremely depressed. Basically, I started getting suicidal because nothing was working. I'd wake up every morning and I couldn't even have a sip of coffee because my hand would just be like this. I couldn't even eat breakfast because I had to hold my other hand to keep my hand from shaking to be able to eat to my mouth because my anxiety was so bad. I was not drinking. I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I was trying to go to yoga, but I couldn't even hold a pose in yoga because my body would shake so much. Like taking a walk felt like it was going to be like going like on a marathon. You know what I mean? So essentially, long story short, there's a lot of stuff that went on in between here, but the reality is I became more suicidal. I got to a point where I felt like I was going to hurt myself because I was so fed up with feeling that way. I felt like my kids, and I want people to really understand this, is when people say that they're suicidal, they're not crazy. And in PTSD, why do you think firemen, now I understand why firemen suicide rates are so high. I get it. And I hate to say that, but like they want to be remembered for the person that they were, not the person that they had now become or what they were suffering through. Right? So at least that's my take on it. I was sitting there going, if I'm going to be this guy sitting inside my room, shaking with anxiety, I can't interact with my kids, I can't be with my wife, I can't provide for my family. Well, what good am I? Right? And it was terrible. And I was just like, dude, this has got to be the worst. Like, this has to stop. I remember literally praying and crying all the time of just make it stop. Right. And I was like, I would rather be remembered as the Nick that was solid Nick than be remembered as this guy. If I'm going to live like this for the rest of my life, then I don't want to live. And it's not about caring about your family, or it's actually the opposite. It's that you care so much about the other people that you feel like you're a burden to them. You feel like you're holding them down. You feel like you're delaying their life. You feel like I was watching my son and my daughter. They're right at the same age. This ties back to my childhood of me. What was I doing at home? Sleeping all day. What was my son doing? Coming in my room trying to wake me up. And what do you think I was having flashbacks of? Me doing the same for my mom, right? And I'm just sitting there going like, I am not going to be that person. Like, I'm not going to have my kids suffer like I did for 13 years. I'd rather pull the plug. And I know that sounds really weird and harsh, but like, that's how bad I was hurting. And all I could think about was my kids and my wife. I just started crying and I pulled off on the side of the road and I turned back around and went home. I called my buddy Mike and told him, said, hey, I was really close today and I don't know what to do. At this point, I had been heard about a place called Deer Hollow, which is in Utah. It's a PTSD specialist place that's run by top-of-the-line therapists that are everywhere from basically around the globe. So remember how I was talking about, like, well, dude, the ER is not for me. The psych ward is not for me. Like, but I know I need help, but these aren't the places that are going to help me. The place that's going to help you is a place like Deer Hollow. That's where we go. And the reason why is because they understand and they get it. You're screened heavily for this. It's not like everyone gets in, but they do med management. I did 45 days. Well, actually, I did more than that. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So I got back home. I talked to a couple different counselors. One of those chick, Tina, was the one that was telling me that I really needed to go. She's from First Alarm Wellness. And she said, hey, like, you need to go, Nick. And at this point, I was like, literally like just a zombie in my house. And Mike came over. He took my car keys from me. He took my wallet from me. And he parked outside my house until I got on the plane, until I left.
Is Micah, was he a firefighter from the department?
Yeah, he's a battalion chief for Central Fire, which is our neighboring agency.
What
kind of like county? It'd be like county.
Gotcha. What were you not letting? What did the fire department do as this months of you dealing with this, or were you kind of like, were they not privy to what was happening, or why didn't this happen sooner? Is my question. Like, why did?
Because I hit it.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I hit it. I opened up to a few people. One of there was a lot of guys from the department that were reaching out to me, but I only trusted really a couple. And when I mean trust, it's not that I don't trust them. When you're in that big of a state, so Mike, the guy that I confided in, he was my junior guard instructor when I was 9 years old. Like, this guy's known me since I was, like, he knew my mom, like, he knew him and I surfed together like crazy. He has PTSD. And he saved my life.
Gotcha. Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify. Okay.
No. I mean, so what I'm getting at is the fire service as a whole, like, you have peer support, right? And you have these peer teams and all these kind of things. Like, they were reaching out to me, and they found out through Mike. And then I had two other people that I was kind of confiding in. I was waking up every morning crying. Like, I could not control my emotions. And I would just get up in the morning, and Mike would call me and goes, let's go for a walk. So I went to, after this stint kind of there, I was getting, so mind you, and I forgot to add about this because this is kind of important. So I had all those stresses from the union, from all these other things. The other stresses that I had, right? Clappy passed away. My buddy Brian, who was my captain, died of brain cancer 6 months after Clappy. And then I had 2 calls. What I learned through this is we had a hanging, but it wasn't normal. We had a guy hang himself in front of me while we were running with a ladder trying to get him. And I had never had anybody hang themselves in front of me actively. So I was getting images of people hanging, not hallucinating, but like when I was going through this, I would like open up a closet, or I'd be trying to take a nap, and I would get an image of just a silhouette of somebody hanging. And I didn't know why. We had 4 drownings up the coast. So we had 4 codexes in 2 weeks. And I pulled 2 bodies out at night in the recovery. And just the view of those bodies I never thought about calls before. Like, we've all had those calls where we're like, oh, I'll never forget that one, right? Haha, like, but not like they haunt you, or like they like subconsciously like are doing something to you. So that's what started happening to me. So backtracking a little bit. Why was I getting suicidal? Well, I felt like crap. I was getting images of that all day long, and I couldn't sleep, and anxiety ridden. Essentially, that's what people do to torture people, like in war, right? Sleep deprivation, right? So all these things kind of stacked up. I ended up going to Deer Hollow. It wasn't what I want to say, or what I wanted was, I wanted the magic pill. Right? I wanted the one thing that was going to make me better, that was going to snap me out of it. And the reality is it's time, and it's trying everything under the sun. From my experience, because there isn't. But if you give up, then what? Right? And thank God I didn't give up. And the only reason why I didn't give up was because my kids and my wife saved my life. Because if I didn't have them to live for, I would have done it. I know I would have. Like, it was that strong. I was that, like, out of it. I don't even know how to this in crisis, and me knowing the system, right? Us knowing the system, I knew exactly what to say. I wasn't going to have them put me on a hold, right? If I answered those questions truthfully, I knew exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to do that. So I need to confide in somebody that. So I did.
This is Joe again from Ventura Fire Foundation. That's it for part 1 of Nick's story. Look for part 2, including an update from Nick, in 2 weeks.